Hello, Crystal and Carly Ann. My name is Chelsea Gould, and my presentation is Becoming a Better Ally. My presentation will address my experience as a member of an oppressed group, my participation as a member of an oppressor group, actions to become a better ally, and an excerpt from Becoming an Ally, Breaking the Cycle of Oppression in People by Anne Bishop. Before reading the book, I was hoping that Bishop would address a new form of oppression, not the most obvious discriminated or oppressed groups. That group is obese people. I truly believe that this is an oppressed group of people who face life-shattering discrimination, albeit not a traditional form of oppression, but one that will soon be categorized as oppressed and or discriminated against. So a little bit of background on me. I grew up in a home witnessing horrendous violence against my mother. We were poor and at times did not have anything to eat. Thus, when we did have food, I would hoard it. We did not know when we would get food next, so I did eat to the point of sickness. To no surprise, I was immensely overweight. I would escape with food. I found solace in its comfort, and really, food was my reliable friend. Food did not yell at me, hit me, deny me, or make me feel sad. Bishop stated, many children who have experienced the pain of powerlessness with an adequate opportunity to heal survive by learning to use a variety of tactics. If they feel they can control the situation, they do so. If control is not possible, they will learn to protect themselves by obeying and pleasing, or they undermine others. My family was the opposite. My brother coped with sports and a bad temper. My sister with anorexia, bulimia, and street drugs. For some reason, though, my weight reflected poorly on my family. I was on Weight Watchers by the time I was 12, which simply taught me to starve myself, and then when I failed at that, I was ashamed and thus started my dysfunctional relationship with the weight scale, food, and fad diets. I can only explain the discrimination that I experienced as acceptable. Yes, I said acceptable. Everyone from a schoolyard bully to Donald Trump feels as though someone's weight and external appearance is grounds for preying on. I've always said that is the last form of acceptable discrimination and oppression. It is not categorized or even formally recognized as discrimination, and it is an obsession of our society to determine one is worthy or not by their weight. In my 20s, I had reached over 300 pounds. I was not lazy. I was not uneducated. This was something medically I learned I could not change. I wore my weakness on the outside, yet I felt invisible, marginalized, stereotyped, and hated by society. I was bullied relentlessly because of my weight, yet I exercised every day and strained over everything I put in my mouth. Walking down the street on more than a few occasions, I had people yell at me from their cars, "Put down the Big Mac! Lose some weight, you fatty!" I overcompensated by people-pleasing, cracking jokes, and overexcelling in academia. I elected to have weight loss surgery in 2013 as it was discovered that my stomach did not recognize when it was full. I lost 150 pounds in a year and a half, and I am more certain than ever that obese people are oppressed in every aspect of society. Obesity as an oppression may or may not be agreed upon by mental health professionals or society at large. All that I can attest to is that I have experienced at both ends of the spectrum, and obese people are certainly discriminated against and are familiar with oppression, whether they realize this fact or not. So moving on, my participation as a member of an oppressor group. I consider myself an aware person of the thoughts and experiences I encounter. I was a member of the oppressor group against Indigenous people. I am in recovery of this, recognizing that my ignorance and childhood experiences greatly influenced my oppression. On page 92 of Becoming an Ally, Bishop outlines identifying oneself as an oppressor. I connected with this literature in that I truly could not understand Indigenous people's struggle, history, or experiences. This develops into lack of empathy and justifications for my opinions of this group. I was not born an oppressor. I learned this behavior. In my neighborhood growing up in government-subsidized housing, witnessing Indigenous people abuse alcohol and having negative interactions shaped my impression of the group as a whole. Our house was broken into by an Indigenous man while we were sleeping. He was bleeding, threatening, and intoxicated, which left me very scared for a long time. At one elementary school I attended, Indigenous children were the bullies, the kids to fear, the kids that always got in trouble and were unsupervised by their parents. They were mainly poor, their houses were filthy, and my memory recollects their parents never working and always being intoxicated. This was the majority of my experiences and perception of Indigenous people. School in southwestern Ontario, where I grew up, did not teach us about First Nations history, only about white man's Canada. I would hear parents talk about such and such drunk and how they hauled their children off to Children's Aid. There was a deep-seated racism, stereotyping, and ignorance all around me. Looking back, I am not surprised I thought so poorly of Indigenous people. It was when I moved out to Alberta that I began to be immersed in the beauty and history of Indigenous culture. I was very conscientious about keeping an open mind. I studied history, modern warfare, in university, so I was aware that experiences can often mislead reality, truth, and understanding. I really connected with how to become an ally, starting on page 94 of Bishop's book. Without knowing it, I had completed these steps, and I was relieved to know that I am and was on the right path to becoming an ally. In the agency I work for, one of the programs is Indigenous Initiatives. I work with many Indigenous people and have immersed myself in training, cultural events, and listening to elders. What do I need to work on to become a better ally? I need to follow more of the advice that Bishop provides. On page 95, Bishop illustrates the need for the oppressor to stop thinking that they are a bad person. I was ashamed of my thoughts, actions, and feelings towards this clearly oppressed group of people. From learning about the atrocities inflicted towards Indigenous people to the perpetuation of ignorance fueled by political and societal structure, it is no wonder the oppression is strong and reinforced. Now that I am aware of this, I am better equipped to combat discrimination within my circle of associates. This is another area I am working on to become a better ally. Address head-on other people's thoughts of discrimination. I also need to be more forgiving of the guilt I feel over the way Indigenous children were taken from their homes to residential schools, to my own ignorance of why this group is in the position that they are in. That level of empathy cited in the book comes from page 81 that really resonated with me as I've reflected throughout the book. Where your fear lies, there lies your power also. Basically what this says to me is that when the power knows of your weakness and fears, they can continue playing upon this fear and weakness, and thus the cycle continues. In conclusion, in order to become a better ally, as seen above, sit down, shut up, and listen. Thank you so much for viewing my presentation, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.